Did you know everything you learned about the Middle Ages is a lie? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you secrets hidden in plain sight, stories your history books erased, and truth powerful enough to make you question everything about kings, knights, and the so-called Dark Era. Imagine a world where disease wasn't just punishment, but a weapon, where peasant revolts were crushed not by swords alone, but by terrifying, invisible forces, and where powerful leaders secretly manipulate entire nations while the world believed in fairness and justice. You'll see how knowledge, science, and ancient skills were deliberately buried to control minds, and how some inventions were punished, hidden, or even destroyed because they threatened the elite's power. Picture cities burning not just by war, but by conspiracy, as entire libraries vanished overnight, erasing truths that could have changed humanity. Then consider this: the plagues you think were random weren't natural disasters. They were predictable, even engineered in ways that no one ever admits. And while the chronicles tell of heroic kings and pious priests behind the tapestries, the real rulers were manipulating religion, fear, and superstition to stay untouchable, creating a society designed to break your spirit, control your life, and make you obedient. Every time a knight rides across your history page, he is hiding secrets, secret societies, forbidden knowledge, underground networks of rebellion, and unrecorded massacres that would make modern horrors look tame. You'll discover how famine wasn't always nature's fault, but often a tool to starve resistance, how law was a weapon, not justice, and how ordinary people lived in a reality your textbooks don't even hint at, full of terror, ingenuity, betrayal, and courage that never made it to the page. And just when you think you understand, I'll reveal the greatest trick of all. The very idea that the Middle Ages were dark is itself a deception crafted centuries later to hide the brilliance, resilience, and shocking secrets that rulers tried to erase. By the end, you'll see that the history you trust, the stories you grew up believing, were shaped not by truth, but by power, fear, and manipulation. And the real story, the one they hoped would vanish forever, is far stranger, darker, and more fascinating than anything you could imagine. But the lies don't stop there, because what they never tell you is that the very notion of awe in the Middle Ages was a carefully constructed illusion, maintained by fear, deception, and invisible chains that bound entire populations without a single law written to protect them. Consider the secret methods of control: messages coded in church rituals, taxes disguised as divine obligations, and punishments so public and brutal that entire communities learned obedience through terror. Yet historians sanitize these horrors into simple tales of morality and virtue, erasing the screams and desperation of those who lived under them. And while the textbooks glorify knights as noble warriors, few mention the mercenary networks and shadow alliance that decided the fate of kingdoms behind closed doors, where betrayals were traded like currency and loyalty was bought and sold at the price of human life, leaving entire regions in silent collapse, hidden from record by the very scribes who chronicled history. Even the architecture you admire, the soaring cathedrals and fortified castles, was not only a symbol of faith and protection, but a deliberate tool of intimidation, designed with secret passages, hidden chambers, and architectural traps that allowed the elite to watch, control, and punish without the masses ever knowing. And if a peasant dared question their place, they could vanish, their homes burned, their names erased, while the chroniclers turned their deaths into tales of martyrdom or divine justice, sanitizing terror into legend. Then there were the plagues, not mere diseases, but events manipulated through neglect, misinformation, and the hoarding of knowledge, where those with understanding of medicine, sanitation, and survival kept secret to maintain power, letting entire populations die so that elites could consolidate wealth, see land, and claim piety, while the masses thought they suffered because of fate or sin. Imagine the horror of knowing that every famine, every sudden outbreak, every mysterious disappearance was not random, but part of a hidden pattern. A web of control stretching across kingdoms, with messengers, spies, and secret enforcers making sure no one questioned the surface narrative. And yet, the people adapted, learned underground survival skills, traded forbidden knowledge in whisper, and built networks of resistance that vanished from history, leaving only vague legends of rebellion that textbooks dismiss as anomalies. And the church, the supposed moral compass, was both protector and manipulator, holding libraries full of advanced science, maps, and philosophical texts that could have rewritten understanding of the world. Yet many of these were deliberately hidden, burned, or altered, ensuring that only interpretations that reinforced obedience survived, while the brilliant minds who challenged dogma were labeled heretics, tortured, or erased, creating a cycle of intellectual suppression so systematic that centuries later we still feel the gaps in what we know, the lost discoveries that might have changed the world. Even daily life was a theater of power, from the laws dictating marriage, trade, and inheritance, to the silent codes that determined who could speak, who could learn, and who could survive. Peasants, artisans, and women often knew more than the rulers wanted to admit, practicing forbidden crafts, secret medicines, and coded communication, passing knowledge in ways invisible to the chroniclers. Yet every success, every innovation was at risk of annihilation if discovered, creating a culture of genius shrouded in fear. And while we celebrate the king, queens, and knights, the real stories are of ordinary people who defied famine, disease, and oppression, crafting secret societies, underground libraries, and hidden economies, leaving traces that only archaeology, folklore, and cryptic manuscripts hint at. Wars were not only fought on battlefields, but in invisible arenas, manipulation of grain supply, control of water and roads, and psychological warfare designed to keep populations compliant, creating a hidden calculus of survival where knowledge equaled power, and ignorance ensured death. Even the so-called Dark Ages were a misnomer, for brilliance persisted in the shadows. Alchemy, proto-science, early engineering, and architecture thrived, but under a veil of secrecy so complete that history remembers only fragments, and when the fragments speak, they tell riddles rather hunt truths, riddles that scholars have debated for centuries without uncovering the full story. And there is the shocking truth about wealth. Treasure hoards, gold, and precious relics were not just currency or religious artifacts. They were leverage, smuggled and hidden to manipulate kings, armies, and even entire populations, with the true location of some riches lost forever, and the pursuit of these hidden treasures fueling conflicts that textbooks reduced to simple conquest narratives, erasing the greed, deception, and intrigue that truly drove medieval politics. And while the narrative tells of kingdoms rising and falling, the reality is far more sinister. Alliances were secret, betrayals common, and wars, sometimes deliberately prolonged or ignited to weaken populations, enrich elites, and maintain a veil of control. And all this happened while chroniclers wrote sanitized versions that glorified power rather than exposing manipulation. Secret knowledge about medicine, astronomy, engineering, and navigation was hoarded by monasteries, guilds, and elite families, and when discovered by outsiders, it was often destroyed or buried, leaving gaps in the historical record that we still struggle to understand, gaps so deliberate that the modern reader cannot even imagine the true capabilities of medieval society. And consider the psychological tools. Fear, superstition, and ritual were systematically employed to manipulate behavior, making people believe they were pious, loyal, or righteous, while in reality every action was subtly orchestrated to reinforce power. Hierarchies punish dissent and maintain control. Women, who appear marginalized in history books, were often the silent architects of survival and rebellion, passing knowledge through secret networks, maintaining hidden economies, and sometimes orchestrating entire revolts from behind veils of invisibility. Their stories lost because they threatened the narrative of male-dominated power, and when scholars attempt to piece together these hidden truths, they rely on fragmented texts, coded messages, and archaeological hints, all pointing to an unsettling conclusion that the Middle Ages were not dark due to ignorance, but because knowledge was deliberately obscured, survival was systematically brutalized, and the truth was constantly rewritten to benefit the few at the expense of the many. And finally, the ultimate revelation: the stories of heroism, chivalry, and piety are only half the picture. And when you strip away the sanitized chronicle, you find a world that is far stranger, darker, and more ingenious than we ever imagined. A world of hidden rebellion, forbidden knowledge, engineered disasters, and everyday courage, where the line between villain and hero, oppressor and survivor, was blurred. And the real Middle Ages were not a tale of darkness, but a complex, living puzzle of power, secrecy, and human resilience, whose full truth has been buried for centuries, waiting for those brave enough to see beyond the stories, to question, to uncover, and to realize that history is not what they told you. It is far more shocking, far more terrifying, and far more fascinating than you could ever imagine. And the secret it hides are still echoing today, in ways most people don't even realize. And now, as we reach the heart of the truth, you must understand that what you've been told about the Middle Ages is only a shadow of reality. The kings you think ruled with justice were often figureheads, while real power rested in unseen hands, advisors, secret councils, and shadow networks that controlled entire nations through fear, misinformation, and strategic cruelty, and sometimes through brilliance hidden from the public eye, where plans were laid that would shape borders, economies, and religions for centuries, all while historians praised the ruler and omitted the invisible architects of history. Consider the hidden rebellions, not just the failed revolts, but the underground networks that survived in whispers for generations, passing coded messages, secret medicine, and forbidden texts, teaching peasants, artisans, and even minor nobles the skills to resist oppression without ever being recorded, creating a culture of quiet subversion that textbooks erase because it threatens the neat narrative of kings and conquest. And the plagues, they were not only natural disasters, but a combination of neglect, social manipulation, and deliberate concealment of cures, where those in control knew more than they revealed, letting millions die to consolidate land, wealth, and obedience, while rewriting chronicles to frame suffering as divine will, moral failure, or fate, hiding the calculated human hand behind catastrophe. Technology, science, and innovation were everywhere. Why? It systematically obscured windmills, waterworks, metallurgy, proto-engineering, and even early chemistry existed far beyond what schoolbooks teach, but the knowledge was deliberately hidden in guilds, monasteries, and secret manuscripts, destroyed if it threatened power, leaving only fragments and mysteries for us to puzzle over today, fragments that hint at a society far more capable and complex than we imagine. And religion, the ultimate tool of control, was not just spiritual guidance, but psychological engineering. Sermons, rituals, relics, and festivals were designed to manipulate belief, enforce obedience, and obscure truth, while some clergy secretly preserved forbidden knowledge, conducted experiments, and recorded truths that would never see the light of public eyes, creating a tension between the visible narrative of faith and the hidden narrative of discovery, a tension almost entirely erased from historical memory. Every story of heroism, knighthood, or saintly virtue was intertwined with manipulation, bribery, and concealed agendas, where a single decision, hidden from the chroniclers, could decide life or death for thousands. Yet history books reduce it to simple morality, hiding the strategic, often cruel reality. And even the maps, which seem to chart the world, were instruments of secrecy. Routes, trade networks, and geographical knowledge were controlled, altered, or concealed to benefit merchants, rulers, and guilds, ensuring only the powerful could navigate, trade, and expand, while the masses remained ignorant, limited, and compliant. Hidden treasures, not just gold but knowledge, astronomical tables, medical texts, mechanical design, were hoarded, stolen, or destroyed, fueling wars, conspiracies, and assassinations. Yet when we look at medieval wealth, we see only fragments of what truly existed, fragments deliberately scattered to erase understanding. Consider famine and scarcity, often engineered through hoarded grain, controlled water sources, and manipulated trade, designed to punish resistance, enforce obedience, and create profit for the elite. And yet history books tell us these were natural disasters, a lie repeated for centuries, and the people who survived, artisans, women, peasants, minor nobles, developed secret languages, survival skills, and networks of resistance, passing knowledge that could challenge rulers, yet leaving almost no record. So their heroism is invisible, their ingenuity erased, their lives reduced to statistics. Cities, castles, and towns were theaters of control, architecture concealed observation points, traps, and secret passages, allowing rulers and elites to watch and manipulate without ever being seen. And every public spectacle, from executions to festivals, was carefully choreographed to reinforce power, fear, and compliance, creating a population conditioned to obey. And finally, the greatest truth, the so-called Dark Ages were not dark because of ignorance, backwardness, or barbarism, but because the brightest knowledge, the cleverest innovations, and the boldest acts of resistance were deliberately hidden, destroyed, or misrepresented. The darkness is a lie, a narrative crafted to make elites look superior, to sanitize terror, and to suppress stories that could inspire rebellion, curiosity, and freedom. And when you pull back the veil, what emerges is astonishing, a world of ingenuity, resilience, danger, and secret brilliance, where humans survived, adapted, and thrived in ways modern minds struggle to comprehend, where every famine, plague, war, and betrayal was intertwined with hidden strategies, unrecorded intelligence, and silent heroism, a world where the line between oppressor and innovator, villain and survivor, was constantly shifting. And as you now look at the Middle Ages, understand this: history is not what you were taught. It is what someone wanted you to see, and the real story, the story of secret knowledge, engineered disasters, hidden rebellions, invisible power, and human brilliance remain buried in manuscripts, ruins, and whispers. The payoff is this: everything you believe about knights, kings, saints, and peasants is incomplete, crafted to conceal complexity, cruelty, and courage, and the true Middle Ages, revealed, are far stranger, darker, and more fascinating than you could have imagined, a living puzzle of human ambition, survival, and ingenuity that challenges your understanding of the past and proves that sometimes the great Saint truths are the ones history itself tried hardest to forget.